Hello and welcome to Taxonomy. Okay, so taxonomy is the science of naming and classifying organisms based on their shared characteristics. So that's what it is. It's not a taxonomist is the scientist who actually studies taxonomy, which would make sense. So this is the person that studies this classification. It is not a taxidermist. Okay, so this is a very common source of confusion, is that we're talking about taxidermy where you're stuffing an animal, and it's not. We are classifying things based on shared characteristics. All right, so a little bit of history on the classification here. We have Aristotle back a long time ago, 344 to 322 BC, and he is credited with developing the first classification system. Okay, so classifying is not anything new. We do it very naturally. You're ninth graders. You're classified as high school freshmen. And so we will classify, we will organize things. We do it naturally, but there has to be a system to be able to communicate. There has to be a uniform system. That's the word I was looking for, uniform. All right, so his classification system divided organisms into whether they were plants or animals. Well, that's great, except not everything is a plant or an animal. And so we needed something that was going to be a little more in-depth. So we moved from Aristotle way back when to the 1700s. Here we have Carolus Linnaeus. I mean, think about that. Someone named their son Carolus. All right, maybe it was a popular name. Maybe it was like Michael back then. All right, so, and Carolus developed the system based on, I was wondering, why is 2 before 1? All right, so Carolus is the father of the modern classification system. So all those little things that I've been telling you about, like store this because in your memory banks, because you'll hear test questions on this, common standardized test questions. This is one. Carolus Linnaeus. Linnaeus is the father of the modern classification system. It's the one that we use now, and it's based on physical and structural similarities. And it uses this concept of a binomial nomenclature. At this point, you know the prefix for bi is what? Yeah, I heard it. Well, I didn't really. I heard it in my head. But bi means 2, and then nom is for name. So it uses this 2-name nomenclature system. All right, so let's take a look at this. So we're looking at a porcupine here. We have 2 names. It uses the genus and species name, and then it tells us exactly what we're talking about. So when you think of the words genus, think of the words generic. When we buy something generic, it's just you're not real specific. It will even describe something as, oh, that's so generic. And but when we say something is specific, think of species and the word specific. So with specific, you know exactly what you're talking about. If someone says to you, I need you to be specific, you know what they're talking about. They need to be detailed. All right, so here with the Indian porcupine is the common name. Hystrix indica is the scientific name. Hystrix is the genus name, and indica is the species name. A couple of things about it. Genus is going to be capitalized. Notice that's capitalized, and the species name is lowercase. All right, whoops, let's go back there. So the whole name is written in Latin, because Latin is considered a dead language and therefore is not going to change over time. So that's why we use Latin, because it's not going to change and everyone's going to use it in the scientific community. So the whole name is italicized. So you'll see back here, this Hystrix indica, that needs to be italicized. It should look like this. All right, I'll give you an example. Okay, so looking at our classification system, I heard a lot of you talking about it in your pre-assessment, so clearly this is not something new to you, this kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So knowing them, and you do have to know them in that order, because we're going from the most general the to very specific, down to we know exactly what we're talking about. And here's one example on a way to remember this. Kings play chess on folding glass stools. I don't know about that one. But so I, of course, being Italian, like to use King Philip came over for great spaghetti because, hello, I have great spaghetti. So, and then, well, we'll use this little write a sentence to help you remember, but that always makes it fun. All right, go away. Go. Whoops, not that far. Come back. Okay, so the classification of a human. If we're going from very broad to very specific, we start with kingdom. So if we're going kingdom, we're kingdom Animalia because as humans, we're animals. Now, if I said I'm thinking of something in the kingdom Animalia, there's no way you would be able to guess exactly what I'm thinking of. That's why it's not specific. It's very general. Then kingdom phylum. Now we're at phylum Chordata, which means we have a spinal cord. All right, and that's just an example of a chordate. Okay, and to continue on, kingdom phylum class. The class is Mammalia, which means that they feed their young milk from mammary glands. All right, so kingdom phylum class. What's next? Order. Order is primates. That means, by definition, they have a large brain, they have this opposable thumb, and I'll show you that in class, but that's, your thumb goes opposite the rest of your fingers, so it makes us able to grasp things. The vision is our dominant sense, and our feet can grasp objects. Okay, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family. Family is Hominidae, and the genus is Homo, and the species is Sapiens. So you've heard humans referred to as Homo sapiens, and that's why, because we're talking about the genus and the species name. All right. Now with phylogeny, that's a nice word. You should say that, phylogeny. That's a good one, isn't it? All right, so phylogeny is the evolutionary history of a species or a group of organisms. And this phylogeny is based on some derived characteristics. So we want to look at what's the history of these characteristics. So derived characteristics are these unique characteristics of just that particular group of organisms. Freshmen have a very specific group of unique set of characteristics. One way to show the relationship of organisms is based on derived characteristics is through cladistics. Cladistics is a system that reconstructs these phylogenies, these groupings of shared characteristics, by inferring the relationships based on similarities. Notice it says inferring. This is not, we don't know. We're looking at these relationships, and then we're trying to come up with a way in order to group them. So the cladistics are used to determine the sequence where a group of organisms have evolved. So here's an example. So if we're looking at, this is what's called a cladogram, and we look here and we start off and we say, okay, it's a vertebrae. And so the sharks are off of that, but sharks are cartilaginous. So you'll see next comes the bony skeleton. So everything here after this mark-off has a bony skeleton. Everything from this mark-off has a vertebrae. So the sharks have a vertebrae, but they're not bony. They're cartilaginous, so they have cartilage. But here we have the bony fish. So that comes in a bony skeleton, which would include our bony fish versus our cartilaginous fish. We'll learn more about that once we start working with the dissecting the sharks. Then we move from bony skeleton to four limbs. So again, all of these have vertebrae, they all have bony skeletons, but now they have four limbs. And then we move up another one, and there is an amniotic egg. The amphibians are before that. They don't have an amniotic egg. And then we look here, we've got primates that have hair, but then here we don't. We have fur, we have feathers, All right, here's another example. All right, so cladistics again is based on the physiological traits, so the actual um, um, physical traits, the morphological traits, so the shapes, the molecular traits, and behavioral traits. So it's not just one specific thing. You can do a cladogram, and you can set it up based on a whole variety. So a cladogram, I keep using this word, but this is a cladogram. This is what it looks like. It's a branching diagram, and that's based on these patterns of derived traits. So it's thought to show some sort of evolutionary relationship among organisms. So you look at and you go, okay, well, the hagfish is a jawless fish, but then we have jaws, and so everything after here has jaws. Everything after here has lungs. So it's just a means of trying to make some sort of explanation. All right, now this concept of homologous versus analogous. Homologous structures are similar in structure and function, and they share a common ancestry. So homologous structures, an example would be a bat wing, a mouse forelimb, and a human arm. Similar in structure, so they have this very similar structures where you have like the metatarsals, you have like fingers and an arm bone is what in a cursory sense here. Or in a crude sense, I should say. And then, and they share a similar function too. The arm and the wing is for movement, and the same thing for the arm and the human and the mouse. An analogous structure is similar in function, but it has a different origin. And so the bat wing has, you can see here's the structure of it, but a butterfly wing doesn't have any of that kind of structure, and a bird wing is very different, but they're all used for flight. Where this, you can have different functions. This can be used for flight, this can be used for grabbing, it can be used for lifting, where analogous structures have a similar function, so they're all used for flight, and but possibly different functions. I mean, different structures, sorry. Okay, so that's it there. In class, I want to go back and I want to revisit, let me get back here. The actual writing, I'll just pull this up. The actual writing of Homo sapiens. I thought I had it on here, but I don't. So I'll show you in class how to actually write this out. Again, this is going to be in italics, and obviously when you write, you don't necessarily write in italics, so you underline this. And so we'll look at how to actually write the genus and species, and how to recognize that we're talking genus and species when we're looking at a scientific paper or really anything. All right, that's all for today. Have a marvelous evening.